and welcome to our webinar on the climate and cost advantages of switching to a heat pump to cool and heat your home. My name is Brad Cundiff, and I'm going to be your host for this evening. The Ontario Clean Air Alliance is working hard to draw attention to climate-friendly alternatives to increasing fossil fuel use, and we think heat pumps are a great one. You can find out more about the organization and our work to eliminate dirty coal in our electricity system at cleanairalliance.org. Tonight, we're going to focus on use of heat pumps for cooling your home. If your AC is starting to cough or wheeze, or you don't have AC at all on these hot days, this is a great time to switch to a heat pump. New incentives make installing a lower cost heat pump that pairs with your air handler or fan in your furnace very attractive. And of course, you get more than an air conditioner. You can also use the heat pump to heat your home in winter. By the way, you can see the recordings of all of our previous webinars, which covered both air source and ground source heat pumps, an FAQ on heat pumps, and testimonials from actual heat pump users at cleanairalliance.org/heat-pumps. We'll put that link on the screen at the end of the webinar for you. Before we begin, we would like to extend our respect to all Indigenous peoples for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. We acknowledge the waters, air, lands, and resources that continue to create safe space for our gatherings, our workplaces, and homes. And we recognize and respect the importance of Indigenous leadership in protecting and stewarding the land. We're really pleased to see a very high level of interest in this topic, and the experts that are on the call today tell me that interest in heat pumps is literally exploding. So this is a great time to get into what they can do for you. I'll get to the speaker introductions in just a minute, but first we have to go over a couple of housekeeping things. We're keeping all cameras and microphones off for everyone other than the speakers for the duration of the webinar. We have also disabled the chat function so as to not distract from the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and we will be reposting that recording later this week. We will not be posting the Q&A, but we will post a summary where usernames have been removed. We'll send everyone who has registered for the webinar the link to the recording and the Q&A when they are posted. So if you have a question you want to ask, you have to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we have a couple of experts on hand to, as well as the panelists, try to answer those questions. We're going to have 3 presentations that are going to take about a total of about 40 minutes, and then we'll deal with some of the questions that are asked live and get some answers. We have both Victor Hyman from ClimateCare and Gil Amdurski from TRCA on hand in the background to help answer your questions, and they are both quite deeply versed in this technology. But please keep in mind that we are trying to provide general advice and not specific installation instructions for your particular home. I also need to note that involvement in this webinar or any mention of a company, service, or product does not represent an endorsement of such from any of the organizations involved. We strongly recommend talking to friends, neighbors, and others and doing your homework before selecting a product or contractor. So as I said, we have 3 speakers tonight who will be talking about the advantages of using heat pumps, again, with a bit of a focus on cooling, but also what they can do by flipping the switch to heating as well. Our first speaker is going to be Heather McDermott, who is the founder of McDermott Climate Consulting, which specializes in research work related to decarbonizing the residential sector. Heather has authored a few reports on the economic and climate benefits of heat pumps for the OCAA, and she's going to talk about the dollars and cents of switching tonight. Eric Jansen is a research scientist with the Sustainable Technologies Evaluation Program of the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. For the past 10 years, he has been a scientific lead on data monitoring for pilot projects, evaluating the performance of emerging low carbon technologies with a focus on heat pumps. And Eric holds a Master's of Applied Science in Engineering Physics. And finally, after the technical experts, we're going to hear about the real life experience of Mike Layton, who has worked to make his family's home gas-free. Many of you will know Mike as a longtime environmental champion and a former city councillor, and he is now with York University. So now I'm going to turn it over to Heather to explain how heat pumps work and a bit about the dollars and cents.
Thank you, Brad. Well, there we go. So I would like to talk to you today about heat pumps and a few of the reasons why I think heat pumps are absolutely amazing for both heating in winter and cooling in summer. I'm going to cover how heat pumps really are air conditioners, but they're more than that. They increase resilience to extreme heat, they increase home comfort, they reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and they save money. What's not to like about heat pumps? So heat pumps are like a 2-for-1 deal. They provide cooling in the summertime, just like an air conditioner, but they also provide heating in the wintertime. They are the exact same technology as an air conditioner, but it has a reversing valve on it that allows it to move in the reverse direction. So moving heat out of a home in the summertime and into the home in the wintertime. Because they're moving heat rather than generating heat, they can be incredibly efficient, 400% efficient in the summertime, 300% on average in the wintertime. So that means they are moving 3 to 4 units of heat energy for every unit of electrical energy that it uses. So incredibly efficient, and it's a trusted and long-standing technology. Your fridge, your freezer, your air conditioner, they're all heat pumps. It uses the same technology. If you trust those, you should trust a heat pump. There are 2 basic types of heat pumps when we're talking about heating and cooling a home. There's an air source heat pumps that extracts heat from the air, and ground source or geothermal heat pumps that extract heat from the ground. 2 types of air source heat pumps. The conventional one, which is just like the heat pumps that my parents had many decades ago when I was growing up. They're fairly simple technology that don't work as well when it gets cold. So you need a secondary heating source, usually a furnace for backup heat. But in the last couple of decades, the technology has really advanced. And cold climate air source heat pumps are heat pumps designed to be the primary heating source down to -15 degrees Celsius or lower. There are some that work very well, right down to -30. The ground source heat pumps are the heat pumps that are exchanging heat with the ground. And because the ground temperature doesn't change by very much over the course of the year, they are some of the most efficient. They are among the most efficient heat pumps available out there. But they do come with a little bit more of an upfront cost because you have to put in the ground loops. If you're wanting to know what a heat pump looks like, the images on the left are the outside units for a heat pump. They look just like an air conditioner because they really are the same technology, only they work in both directions. You won't be able to tell whether these boxes are heat pumps or air conditioners unless you read the fine print on the box. And then just like an air conditioner, if you have forced air system, it will connect to this box that helps to circulate the cool or warm air. And if you have a hybrid heat pump where you have the heat pump cooling the house in the summertime and warming during the warmer part of the winter, and a furnace warming in the cold parts, it's all contained within that box. Doesn't look any different. But if you don't have any ductwork, you can still put in a heat pump. The inside units look like what we've got here on the right. So the cassette can be mounted on the wall or in the ceiling or on the floor, and there will blow warm or cool air into the home as appropriate. And we're hearing a lot more about heat pumps and air conditioners perhaps right now, because there's a growing recognition that homes not only need a heating source, but they also need to be cooled in this day and age in Ontario. We know from historical data and climate projections that in Ontario, climate change is already here. We are already seeing higher average temperatures, higher extreme heat, more extreme heat days. And this is we're going to see even more of that in future. How much more depends on how quickly we can reduce our emissions around the world. And the graph I'm showing here on the right is the number of extreme heat days on average in Ontario. The bottom part is historical, and you can see that we've already seen an increase in the number of extreme heat days. And in future, there will be either a little bit more if we can really cut our emissions very quickly, or a lot more of extreme heat days. And of course, we know that extreme heat days are deadly as well. About 5 years ago, 200 people in Ontario and Quebec lost their lives to extreme heat. And just last year in BC, it was about 600 people who lost their lives in a heat dome. So heat really is deadly. Increasingly, all homes are going to need cooling in the summertime. And heat pumps really are the better solution than an air conditioner. The heat pump, just like an air conditioner, keeps a home cool in the summer, but it also warms in the wintertime. And an added bonus of a heat pump is that it provides more even heat in the wintertime than conventional other heating systems like a furnace do. One of the top things that people who have installed heat pumps say about them is that they find their home more comfortable when the heat pump is running because of that more even heat. So if you have an air conditioning that's coming to the end of its life, I encourage you to consider a heat pump replacement rather than an air conditioner. And one of the really key benefits to choosing that heat pump over the air conditioner is your home will be responsible for less greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, heat pumps are the top solution recommended for decarbonizing buildings, as recommended by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, by the International Energy Agency, and by just about every climate action plan that I have ever read. And that is because heat pumps are the most energy efficient way to heat and cool a home. Heat pumps can achieve zero emissions when we have zero carbon electricity. Heat pumps are often the most cost-effective solution available, and that is true here in Ontario already. And finally, heat pumps are a proven technology. They've been around since the mid-1800s. In Ontario right now, heat pumps can reduce your emissions from heating your home by 35 to 45%, but that rises to 100% when our electricity is decarbonized, which will hopefully be by 2035. An air conditioner lasts for about 15 to 20 years on average. So if you're looking to replace an air conditioner and you put another air conditioner in instead, you risk that air conditioner becoming a stranded asset as we shift towards heat pumps for heating and cooling. What's more, putting in a heat pump can save you money. you can save you money both with cooling and with heating. So we'll look at the cooling first. Many heat pumps are more efficient than conventional air conditioners. And being more efficient means that they use electricity, which means that you save money. And right now, there are lots of incentives available for heat pumps, including those hybrid heat pumps that rely on another heating source for the very coldest days. The incentives have recently been increased for some of those hybrid systems. So it's important to talk to your installer and find out what incentives qualify and make sure they choose heat pumps that do qualify for those rebates. So incentives include the Home Efficiency Rebate Plus, which is the new name for the Greener Homes Grant. If you're on oil, there's the Oil to Heat Pump Affordability Program. There are also 0% financing loans from the Greener Homes loans, and many municipalities are bringing in low interest financing. Another perk is the Save on Energy Peak Perks, which is a demand response program available for air conditioners and heat pumps. So heat pumps with smart thermostats that do qualify for the Save on Energy Peak Perks program. So you have the potential to save money on cooling and on the upfront costs. You also have the potential to save money with heating. So the graph here is showing the cost per gigajoule of heat output, which is just to say that the cost per unit of heat in your home. And of course, we know that heating oil and propane are very expensive ways to heat a home. They are the highest on here in Ontario. This is July 2023 rates, so it's current rates. We also know that electric resistance heating is a very expensive way to heat a home in Ontario. Of course, electric resistance is not the same as an electric heat pump. Electric resistance is maximum 100% efficient. Doesn't have that 300, 200, many 100% efficiency that you get with heat pumps. Heating with gas was for a long time the cheapest option in Ontario, but that is no longer the case. So gas is marginally more expensive than a cold climate air source heat pump for heating over the entire winter season right now. And a ground source heat pump, because it's more efficient, is significantly cheaper on a per unit heat basis. But what's really important here, and those arrows are representing, is that the carbon price is going to drive up the cost of heating oil, propane, and gas. And that price is expected to rise significantly faster than any increase in electricity. And so the savings from switching to a heat pump for heating in the wintertime are going to be increasing. And even if you're still using the gas furnace for a part of the heating, anytime you're using a heat pump for heating, you are likely to be saving money. And I like to walk the talk. So I installed a heat pump in my home in 2020. I live in Kitchener-Waterloo. We've been through 3 winters now. We no longer have a gas connection to our home because our heat pump is able to provide all of the heating required and all the cooling. I can say that I am way more comfortable in the summer and in winter in my home since we installed the heat pump. And because the heat pump is so efficient, I'm able to, my home is now net zero energy with solar panels. And that was only possible because the heat pump is so efficient and uses so little electricity. I have absolutely no regrets, and anybody visiting my home gets to see the heat pump because I really love it. It's so cool. If you're interested in more information about heat pumps and especially the cost effectiveness of heat pumps compared to gas, I encourage you to look at the Ontario Clean Air Alliance website. The QR code in the corner here will take you directly to the part of the website with all of the reports on them, as well as a calculator that we have that can help you to estimate how much money you can save in your home by switching to a heat pump. But just to sum things up, Heat pumps are a 2-for-1 deal. If you're replacing an air conditioner, go for a heat pump because you'll get some heating as well as cooling. Heat pumps improve health through resilience to extreme heat. They improve home comfort. They lower your carbon emissions. It is a great climate solution, and heat pumps can save you money. Heat pumps are the future. Don't get left behind. So I think we are transitioning now to Eric. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, thanks, Heather. That I think helped give us a grounding in what the advantages are and the importance of the role of heat pumps in cooling as well as heating, which is something that people tend to overlook about them due to that name. So they are really heating cooling pumps. Okay, so Eric is now going to walk us through in a bit more technical detail some of the findings from the TRCA studies. Over to you, Eric.
Okay, perfect. So thanks everyone for coming here today. My name is Eric Jansen. I'm a research scientist with the Sustainable Technologies Evaluation Program of the Toronto Conservation Authority. And I'm here today just to try and make the overall case for why you should be choosing an air source heat pump for your home, especially in the situation where you need to replace only your air conditioner. So let's jump into it. So just an outline of the presentation. Firstly, I'm going to give a quick intro to my organization and the sort of work we do. I'll quickly discuss some heat pumps in my own home because I think it's relevant. Then get into the presentation goals. We'll talk about some new developments in the incentive landscape, which Heather touched on. And then the brunt of the presentation, we'll be looking at data from homes that have made the switch or are currently in the process of doing it right now. So yeah, my group, the STEP team, we're from the Toronto Conservation Authority. Essentially what we do for today's purposes is we collect data either in the lab or in the real world from actual homes on heat pump performance and the overall homeowner experience with the technology. And our goal in doing that is to try and fill the data gaps and overall de-risk the technology for homeowners. So we want to be able to answer with good data questions like, are homeowners satisfied with their heat pumps? How much do they save? What's the business case? And things of that nature. So towards that end, we do various case studies on heat pumps in actual homes, and I'll be presenting some of that data today. I should just quickly mention too, my own home, I installed a heat pump both for the water heating and the space heating about 6 months ago, so late January, early February. I installed a hybrid system, so it is a air source heat pump that's backed up by a furnace, and I'll get to that in a minute. The point I want to just make quickly is that, I mean, I think we're used to hearing maybe that heat pumps are more expensive than conventional equipment. But I just want to hammer home the point that with the current rebate landscape and 0% financing, there are options that are on par with conventional equipment, or in some cases even cheaper. In my own home, installing a heat pump was ultimately the lower cost option upfront versus installing conventional equipment. So I mentioned I had a hybrid system. In my case, it's a hybrid with a cold climate heat pump. So the heat pump's capable of doing about 98% of the annual heating load. So nearly all of it. When it gets down to -20, then we're going to have to use the furnace. But now I'm going from several hundred meters cubed of gas per year to several meters cubed, and in some years, no gas consumption at all. So while I did install the hybrid, I do want to note, so that was a technical solution to an issue. I have a 100 amp panel. I wanted to electrify both my water heating and my space heating. I didn't quite have enough for the electric resistance backup, or so I thought, on my 100 amp panel, which after speaking with the utility, I couldn't upgrade. I did learn that there are some tricks you can deploy if you're in my situation. I don't have time to get into it in the main part of the presentation, but if you're interested in learning more of that, just ask in the question period and I can discuss that in a bit more detail. And also on the topic of cooling, I should also mention, we try not to use the AC too much in my house. So most of the cooling we've had so far is actually from our water heater. It's a heat pump water heater. So if you're interested in learning more about that, also feel free to ask about it in the question period. So the goals for today, what I want to do ultimately is show you that it really no longer makes financial sense to install a central air conditioner. And that if you need to do an AC replacement, you should really be considering an air source heat pump instead. This is because air source heat pumps are greener. They can be lower cost up front, as we'll see. They can reduce your bills, and Heather discussed this. They can do most or all of your heating in some scenarios, and they can offer essentially better features at a lower cost than even basic AC. So I mentioned that heat pumps, they have a lot to offer. How can they be cheaper? How can they be lower cost up front than a standard air conditioner? It has to do with just how the rebate landscape has changed. Just to put it simply, now if you're only replacing an air conditioner with a heat pump, and the heat pump is going to work with the existing furnace, that is now available in the incentive program, whereas previously it wasn't. So if you just want to replace your air conditioner, you can choose an air source heat pump, and you can get, depending on the equipment, but qualifying equipment can get up to $6,500 of incentive in Ontario. So this is a pretty compelling reason to have a look at air source heat pumps. So I'm going to get into some data from actual installs now. I just want to offer a quick disclaimer. I am going to show actual equipment costs, but this can be a bit of a thorny issue because there's really a big range of installation costs that are possible. It can vary with a variety of factors: the installing contractor, the geographical area, inflation, the equipment you choose, the home itself, and some installation specific challenges when the install was done. Even something done 3 months ago, the equipment might have increased since then. So when I give you show a cost, don't want you to interpret that as me saying this is my guarantee that you're going to pay this much, but this is a real cost that an actual homeowner had, and it's just to give you an overall financial sense of the business case for the heat pump. So let's start with the first home that I wanted to talk about. This is actually my parents' home. It's a 60s era bungalow. It's in the Niagara region. They went through started the grants process, being interested in replacing the windows, which are original to the home, doing some air sealing and other things like that. Their furnace and AC, it's several years old, 7 or 8 years old. It's not yet in need of replacement, but at the same time, they want to have a really environmentally friendly home. They want to have an energy efficient home. They don't want to be producing carbon emissions and be doing the right thing by the environment. But at the same time, they're retirees, and if they're going to do something, especially if they're going to replace equipment before the end of its life, they really need to do it. It's got to be on a budget. So I suggested to them, well, if you're interested in kind of reducing the gas consumption of your home, you should really consider an air source heat pump that is going to operate with your existing furnace rather than an out-and-out system replacement. So they went out and got quotes from different installers. Ultimately, they landed on it's a 2-ton cold climate air source heat pump that qualifies for the $6,500 per plus rebate. This heat pump is going to do all of their cooling. It's got good capacity maintenance, so that means it can continue to heat the home even in cold temperatures. From looking at the design heat load of the home and the capacity curve of the heat pump, kind of my estimate, it's about 90% of their annual heating load is going to be done by the heat pump. And when it gets much colder than -10, that's going to require the furnace. But as I'm trying to show on the plot on the right-hand side there, that doesn't happen very often in a kind of Southern Ontario climate. So the cost to install their heat pump all in was $8,100, so $8,000, a bit more. Again, costs vary. That's not my guarantee that's what you're going to pay, but ask around and get multiple quotes. It qualifies for the $6,500 HERB Plus incentive. So the post-rebate cost to install the heat pump in their home is $1,600. So if you've gone out and bought air conditioners before or any HVAC equipment, you know that this is really inexpensive. This is lower cost than even the most basic air conditioner that you could buy. And you can envision someone, so it's low enough in their case that they're going to preemptively replace their equipment, but you could imagine someone that really, they needed to replace their AC. This is going to be the lowest cost option to do it. And it's not just about upfront costs. Compared to a basic air conditioner, which most other people would tend to purchase, the air source heat pumps is going to be quieter. It's going to offer better cooling efficiency, as Heather discussed, and typically be better at dehumidification as well. So if you actually do need to replace your AC, if it's approaching end of life, why wouldn't you choose a heat pump? It can be lower cost to buy. You can get better performance in cooling mode, and it can do the majority of your home heating as well and generate savings there. So that's someone that's doing the rebate, kind of the install right now and getting the rebate. We did connect with a couple homeowners that had made the switch a year ago. They didn't get the rebate, but we did collect the data on how much money they're saving. So let's have a look at that now. The first home we looked at is in Richmond Hill. So like I said, they did this more than a year ago. So we have a year of post-retrofit operating data from the utility bills, and we can look at the pre-retrofit data to get a sense of, well, how did the gas consumption and electricity consumption of the home change as a result of the heat pump install. And for a quick intro to the home, rather than me tell you about it, we did create this quick video. So I'm going to see if I can just share that quickly. So bear with me for one moment. Okay, here's the intro.
My name is Rick Wu. I live in a detached house in Richmond Hill. The house is about 25 years old, built in the late 90s. I moved in a couple years ago, and when I moved in, I upgraded the windows to a double pane low E coating windows, and also I added insulation in the attic. Last spring, I decided to replace the original AC unit, which is over 25 years old, with an air source heat pump, and to work with my existing furnace as a hybrid system. I'm very happy with it. It's performed better than my expectation. It's very warm, cozy, and also it's very quiet. I have much better humidity control during this the heating season, and yeah, overall very happy with it. I bought this air source heat pump because the AC unit is original to the house, is like over 25 years old. So when I go for shopping, I want to compare the cost of installing a air source heat pump or just a regular air conditioning. And I find out that the cost is marginally higher than a regular AC. So I took this chance to actually get the heat pump so that it can work with my existing furnace as a hybrid system. The goal obviously is trying to get some savings, especially with the rising natural gas costs, and also lower the emission from my heating. No, I did a lot of research on the heat pump model, and I understand proper sizing is important, so finding the right unit and the right installer is important. I did some of my own analysis using the online tools that is readily available, so I do not have any problems with that. I think installing a heat pump should be a default when a homeowner is trying to replace their old existing AC unit. There are different types of heat pump for every kind of homes or application, and by doing that, you have a benefit of lowering emission, also trying to lower your cost of heating through the cost of the natural gas. So again, I would recommend everybody to do this.
Okay, that worked. Let me just get back into the other presentation. Okay, so that was Rick Wu's home in Richmond Hill. I just want to quickly note, he did say that it cost marginally more than an air conditioner. This was equipment he installed a year ago that he didn't get the rebate for. If he's doing the same install today, then he would have gotten a rebate, depending on the equipment he chose. I think he would choose something that received the rebate, of course. So like I said, we look at the utility bills pre and post retrofit. We determine how did the kilowatt hours go up and how did the meters cubed of gas go down. And then using the utility rates that we had throughout that period, we can apply $1 savings to that amount. We estimated that for the past year, the savings is on the scale of about $100 for the rates we had during that period. But But of course, it's tricky to say what it's going to be year over year, especially because natural gas is very volatile and it changes drastically. So we also just kind of present the results in terms of, well, under different utility rate scenarios, this is some of the results. One of the things to note that we do have carbon pricing moving out to 2030, which is going to slowly increase or quickly increase the cost of natural gas. So you can imagine a scenario where everything else stayed the same, but then looking out to 2030, what would the savings be? And then in that case, it might be approaching $300 per year. But of course, we don't really know ultimately what's going to happen. But in his case, the heat pump is a bit of a hedge against future rate increases because now he's not entirely dependent on gas. As a third example, I'm just going to give a quick teaser for Mike's home. He's going to talk about it in detail. His savings is substantially more, and I actually haven't discussed these findings with him yet, so I'm hoping this doesn't. I mean, he knows how much he saved, I imagine. But he did several measures. He increased the insulation of his basement. He installed a heat pump water heater, which is much more efficient than an old gas tank water heater, and he did the heat pump too. And in doing so, he got the home entirely off natural gas, and there was a fixed cost savings in doing that, which I'm sure he will discuss. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up my talk here. The question is, why would you install a central air conditioner in the current context? There's heat pump options that are lower cost to purchase, lower cost to operate, quieter than a basic AC, can provide better thermal comfort, and at the same time, it's greener. You can have a heat pump operating with an existing furnace as backup, or it's feasible to fully electrify your home, and Mike's going to show you an example of that. If you need to do a full HVAC replacement, we've done a separate webinar on that, which you can watch. That makes sense as well, either air or ground source heat pumps. I just want to note as well, I didn't have a chance to get into it, but note that using an air source heat pump with an existing furnace, it does require special consideration from your installer. And ideally, you would find an installer that has experience, and that's really key to the success of the retrofit, experience installing the equipment that they're selling. And we'll speak to that a little bit in the question periods if those questions come in. Just encourage you to check out our webpage, smarterhomeheating.ca. There's more videos, more resources, more information on case studies. The ones I presented today will be up on the website soon. And if you want to ask us a question directly, you can ask us through our homeowner question and answer portal, which is also on smarterhomeheating.ca. My final thought for today is just don't wait until your equipment breaks down entirely to start planning. And this is a major pitfall that I think many people are going to fall into. You don't want to be making the decision under duress during a heat wave. You want to give yourself some time to plan so you can make the decision that's right for you. Just want to offer a quick thanks to the funders and partners for the work that we do, the Atmospheric Fund, and some municipal partners, the City of Toronto, Region of Peel, and New York Region. Again, reach out to check out our webpage, smarterhomeheating.ca. You can email me directly, but I would encourage you to use the question and answer portal. Thanks to Rick Wu and Mike Layton for donating their data. And just a quick kind of legal disclaimer. This doesn't necessarily represent the policy of supporting agencies. If I mention trade names, vendors, or commercial products, it's not my endorsement of those products or services. So thanks everyone, and look forward to engaging more in the question period.
Thanks, Eric. That was very helpful. I just want to remind folks that we're not going to take questions live. You have to type your question in the Q&A box for us to try to get it in, and I will be posing the questions to the panelists when we get to that particular slot. So now I'm going to ask Mike Layton to walk us through his gas-free home.
Thank you very much. I am just going to get my screen and my presentation up. This is why I tried to make sure I did it during the trial, because it's not going up for some reason. Are we seeing this?
We can see that, Mike.
We see the presentation.
We're seeing the right screen. Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity from the organizers, all the organizations involved. This is really now has become a passion project as while I'm no longer in government supporting the actual rollout. this has become a bit more of a passion project, understanding that, as we heard from Heather, just the impact that buildings have on climate and our health, as well as heat pumps in particular. I am now at York University as the Chief Sustainability Officer, trying to decarbonize a small city in the north end of Toronto. But like, frankly, using very, very similar technology, because it is tried and true. Like we've heard from both the previous speakers, we are talking decades, maybe over a century of use of this technology. So it is nothing new. Full disclaimer, I am not an engineer or an HVAC expert, as our two previous speakers were. By no means am I an expert in either of those areas. I do have a general knowledge across a range of sustainability initiatives around buildings and housing, but I'm not a specialist in that regard. So I'm going to get a little personal here. Frankly, I think all of us have this deep personal connection with our homes, and mine is no different. And the importance of the home and my home of being a safe, comfortable, and healthy place for my family is very deeply ingrained in my heart, as it is, I'm sure, many, if not all of yours. So if you'll bear with me a minute, I'm going to go through a little quickly. We're going to start with a bit of a story about my family. In 2017, we were expecting our third child. My wife was very pregnant with our second child. Our eldest, Phoebe, and an expecting mom, and we lived in a 2-bedroom, actually on the same street we live now, but a small 2-bedroom, and we wanted a little bit more space to accommodate the additional sister that was about to move in. We found a great house. It was dated for sure. Needed new countertops, needed new walls, needed new moldings, all of those things. But more importantly, also needed an energy upgrade. This house was 100+ years old, your typical Toronto semi-detached home in an old neighborhood. Older windows, not the original ones, because those would be really old. Older windows, not the insulation that you'd want. We had a relatively new high efficiency gas furnace, an old water heater, and old windows and doors. But if there's 3 things I'd like to leave you with is today, before I start, is your home is probably the place where you spend most of your time. So you want to make sure it's comfortable and healthy, because that's where you're spending your days. But if you're like me, you also want to make sure that it's leaving an impact on the environment, a healthy impact on the natural environment for your kids. Like we talk about investments in our homes. Well, I want my investment to have significant, or at least not as much as a negative impact on the natural environment than I know it did prior to us moving in. It's easier than you think to decarbonize your home. It will be more comfortable at the end of the day if you take the necessary steps along that pathway towards building a more efficient home that's decarbonized. All of those things are true. I didn't think that we were going to go all the way to disconnect our gas line when we started. That was certainly not our guiding light. That was not our goal. But then I realized everything we needed to get there was available at the hardware store. This wasn't us going online and buying equipment that hadn't been tried and true and tested. It was all available at the local hardware store. I didn't do it myself. I didn't do the work myself. Maybe you're more competent at that than me and a handier sort of person, but I hired outside support to do it right. But it was all, you could purchase it all online at your local hardware store, or just go and show up. And the last point is, the government has significant sources of financing to help support you down these lines in a number of ways you might not have considered yet. And then finally, just, you won't regret it. Like that's something that I feel very strongly, is that once we took the first step, it was that much easier to take the second, third, fourth, and then I think like we'll call it a fifth step. But so back to August 2017, we found our new home. We started moving in. We didn't have a huge budget for renovations. It was Toronto housing was expensive then as it is now, but we knew we wanted to build on the efficiency of the home first, build out the envelope of the property. So we did what you do: get an energy audit. Step one, go out, figure out what where we were losing heat and what we could do. Get some specialists with some expertise to help us that. This is the energy audit from our house, in fact. And so we had someone come in. The original home energy audit, we actually had two over the course of the 5 years that 5.5 years we've been at the house, because we had a first one and we did some of the work immediately. We did the I'll first say we didn't score particularly well. Well above the average for this is actually our second energy audit, so it's after we put in a little bit of insulation. I'll have to find the original one, but we scored well above the typical new house, and didn't score particularly well. And so we knew we had a long way to go in the original energy audit. So we started out with and this just actually shows more specifically where the energy consumption was, and a huge amount of it was coming from space heating. So we started where one does about building a strong shell around the house, building out that envelope. We insulated our exterior walls. As I said, we were we insulated our exterior walls in our attic. It's what we could get funding from Enbridge at the time. There was not a Greener Homes program to help support us in our efforts. The Harper government had canceled the Eco Energy Homes program. I think that was done in like 2010 or something like that. There was not another incentive to do it, to do some of the other work that we could rationalize in our budget. So we took the small amount of money that we did some of the easy work, so air sealing and blowing in insulation. Now we actually use the technique that you'll see on the left there. Rather than open up all the walls to put more insulation in, they got a little hose gizmo. They drill a hole. There's probably technical terms for this. I'm not an HVAC expert, as I've expressed. They put a little hose in and they start pushing as much of the cellulose as they can into the wall cavity. Pull it out. You put a little spackle or drywall compound on top, and you sand it down. And we were painting anyhow, so then painting and great. But this was the first step that we did to start reducing our energy use. I should tell you, our walls were cold to the touch when we originally moved into the house, so we knew from day one that this was something that we needed to do. Then we explored windows and doors. So we looked at what we needed to do to get all the air sealing around. We actually found that there was ice forming on the inside of our windows that during the winter time, in that first winter that we were in the house. And so we knew that, again, this was a step that we wanted to take. There wasn't an incentive for this when we did it, although they evolved over time. Fortunately, the government did put some in, the provincial government of the day put some in. We then went ahead and looked at upgrading to a heat pump. And so this is the picture of our heat pump beside our house. We wanted one that would fit in just next to our front, where our air conditioner are. We had an older air conditioner, so we thought it was time to swap it out. It hadn't broken down. We planned in advance. We knew we were gonna do this. We knew our air conditioner was reaching end of life. So we did our research. We went out and got our quotes. While there's been a lot of talk about not endorsing our installers, and I won't mention the names, I will quite happily endorse if anyone DMs me on any of the social media. platforms, because we are very pleased with the outcome at the end of the day. We got quotes from 4, as one does, just to make sure they're getting a good deal. But we went out and got our quotes, found the best price. It came recommended from our energy auditor. It just so happened to be the same one. And we went ahead and got the install, and it tucks quite efficiently in the back of our or the side of the front of our house, beside our front porch. I will say we have a cold climate unit that goes down to -15, but we were a little concerned that we would need a backup heat source. So we did keep the original air handler in the furnace in the basement with the connection to gas the first year. And I can tell you a little bit about that in a second, but we ended up being quite confident that the -15 unit was enough for us to actually disconnect our secondary backup entirely after our first winter. So this is just our Ecobee and our thermostat and the heat pump. And then my kids start to come into some of the pictures. We installed a hot water heat pump, as Eric mentioned, that in the basement, that takes a little bit of the heat out of our utility room where our furnace is, and in fact keeps our water nice and warm at a very small cost. I would have thought an electric hot water heater would have been very expensive. It was actually quite inexpensive. It heats all the water for me and my 2 little girls and my wife to about to the tune of about 2 kilowatt hours a day, and it typically shifts it towards the nighttime when we're off peak. So the cost is quite low. I will say the last piece was our stove, and we were, this was after about a year. We had the gas backup. We kind of thought that was all the work we were going to do, but I was getting an Enbridge bill for $25 every month, all winter and all summer, and I realized like we were using $1 of natural gas on our old gas range, and I was getting a $25 bill, and that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Then we woke up one morning, we're probably cooking actually at the stove, and heard the story on CBC about how much of the emissions from the gas stove actually ended up in your indoor air, and the how negative the indoor air, or how bad the indoor air quality could get as a result of gas stoves only. And not to mention, like, you got a furnace and a hot water heater burning natural gas in your house, but this is right in your core living space. Both of our kids have asthma, not severe asthma, but have asthma. And the story was that this was a serious concern for health. So, and I won't go into great detail because I love my induction stove, but because I very much love to cook. I would never go back from this particular change, because it allowed us to not only to improve the indoor air quality, and it's great to cook on, but it also allowed us to turn off our gas connection permanently. So that's what we did. We did a little bit more, sorry. And I don't know if this video will play, but this is just our solar panels going up onto the roof of the house with the Greener Homes grant. We decided to go a little bit further with all of this and actually install solar panels as part of our effort to decarbonize our home. As you can see, it's not a huge roof. We didn't have a microfit, but the finances still make sense from a net metering perspective in order to pay back the panels over a reasonable course of time. I think for us, it'll probably be between 10 and 12 years based on the financing, the cost of financing. But they've been working great. We're able to generate about 60% of the power that we use in our home. And as you've heard, our home is entirely electric. So we're not using another energy source, but it's about 60% with the 6 kilowatts that we installed on the roof. There was one more piece that we were able to do as part of a pilot project with Toronto Hydro. Was they were installing Tesla power walls in certain geographic areas in Toronto in order to test a technology that would allow them to pull power out of those power walls at peak in order to stabilize the grid. So the benefits to the utility are better management at peak. They don't have to draw a huge amount more power in. Helps us meet our Transform TO goals because it's less burning of peaker plants at peak. And it's much more cost effective to deploy this type of peaker related energy. For homeowners, we have a better resilience, a protection against blackouts in our house, and a cost reduction because we're actually able to or shift our power off peak. We're able to chase peak, I guess, or not chase peak or avoid peak, which allows us to reduce our bills in a little bit. Our EnerGuide score. So after our final energy audit, we had our energy auditor back in, and lo and behold, we went from what I should have had the comparison here, about 140 to 22. Now this 22 is because there's some residual fossil fuels in the grid that it doesn't take into account my peak shaving. So I'm pretty sure it's less than 22, but this is the official score. We'll call it, but it did. You can see just how significant it was on the costs. We've gone through some of the costs. It's tough to judge how much the heat pump contributed to this. Our heat pump, just for comparison purposes, was $5,000, or sorry, 4,400 installed. And we did it at the same time with the hot water heater. It was in the same place. We had the capacity on our panel to take both the heat pump and the hot water heater, so we didn't need to make any massive changes to our power capacity. But we did do significant basement insulation. But frankly, that was just as much to make it a livable environment for us as it had 1 inch of white foam insulation, and we went to R23 and R22 in different parts of the basement. So we did do a significant amount of other upgrades, but we didn't necessarily need to do all those things. And of course, the solar was a significant investment on our part to make it to not only decarbonize, but an investment in the long-term viability of our home. And got a significant savings from the battery, given it was part of a pilot project. These are some of the benefits we saw. We took advantage of the energy audit financing, the Greener Homes grant, the Enbridge rebate, net metering access, which actually gives us some payback on months like about 6 months of the year. We have a credit with Toronto Hydro. And then 6 months of the year, we have fairly significant bills. I know there were some questions about how our bills changed. Our bills both went down in the summer and the winter in our combined bill, but it was a significant increase in the amount of electricity that we were using. So the electricity component of the bill went up, but the gas bill disappeared. So the net, there was a savings in the wintertime, a significant savings in the summertime. And this is where perhaps I didn't expect this. We actually have a lower consumption of electricity in the summertime than we used to. Even with our AC going, which isn't going all the time, but our heat pump is going today and during heat waves, an electric stove, electric hot water heater, all of that, because of the efficiency of I put it to the efficiency of the heat pump, that actually means we consume less electricity even in the summer, despite the fact that we switched all of our appliances over to electricity. We didn't take advantage of the Greener Homes Zero Interest Grant. We were a little bit too early adopter by about 3 months, unfortunately. So it didn't bode well on us, but we did take advantage of the Home Energy Loan Program, which was our plan. It was a program that I helped develop at the City of Toronto starting in 2012, and I'm happy to do it because I was very much involved with that, as well as we avoid the inflationary increase of utility costs on the gas side, certainly, but a little bit on the electricity side, because we are producing 60% of our electricity ourselves and lock that in at the price that we paid when we installed the panels. So we avoid future inflation, the gas increase, and you can avoid financing costs, although our interest rate is that of the home energy loan program, which is low, it's just not zero. And then finally, like, we love our space and we really enjoy it, and we wouldn't go back for anything. We have a healthier and more comfortable home, lower monthly bills, lower GHG emissions, and simply a much more healthy environment for all. My last point, sorry, I threw these on last minute, was just to demonstrate how much the GHG, the gas usage went down with each of our technologies. This is the total cubic meters per year, went from about just under 2,000 cubic meters per year to zero, most of which was the heat pump and and I credit some to insulation, but technically it's the heat pump that actually allowed us not to use the gas. And then again, the GHG saved, like, we went to saving 3.4 tons of GHGs annually that won't be emitted from our home as a result of the work we've done on an annual basis. And as this is from a previous presentation, there is more here, but I'm going to leave that and hand it back to our host.
Thanks very much, Mike. That was a very informative tour and really interesting. But you had indicated that you also want to answer a question about keeping the windows open and whether it affects the performance of the heat pump, having it come on and off.
I tried answering that online, and I believe I wasn't able to. We keep our windows open almost all the time. There are select days that we don't. The heat pump, when we kick it in, it's almost immediate. The heating takes a little bit longer, incidentally, to change if you're really having big shifts. But the cooling is almost instant to the house. It works quite quickly. So there's no problem with turning it off or keeping it off most of the summer and just turning it on for 2-3 days. That's in fact how we like to manage the heat in our house, or the air conditioning in our house.
Great. And Eric, you teased everyone with your 100 amp versus 200 amp miracle solution. Maybe you can expand on that, because we've had quite a few people ask for further details on that.
So yeah, not a miracle solution necessarily. I just, like, even me being around this for as long as I have been, I'm still learning new things every day. So my situation was, I have a 100 amp service. I wanted to do the hot water, which I did with the heat pump water heater, the space heating with a heat pump, which I did, but the space heating heat pump didn't have quite enough capacity, and I needed a little bit of electric resistance heating. And I think the solution, to me, in hindsight, which would have been kind of cheaper to do and certainly cheaper to operate, would be to replace my dryer. So, like, start looking at your existing loads and how can you make space on the panel. If I went from my electric resistance dryer to a heat pump dryer, it would make significant space on the panel. And another option would be to put the electric resistance backup on the same circuit as the dryer. There's some technologies, I don't know the specifics of it, but it's available, so that only one would operate at the same time. This is a technology that's come along for electric vehicles as well. Putting it on the same circuit as another large load, so that you don't exceed the current ratings of the panel, but you can still use either or at any given time. So yeah, that was ultimately the solution in my case. If I would have done that, then the all electric kind of heat pump install, like I costed it out, would have been cheaper to do. And then I wouldn't be paying, as Mike kind of alluded to, the $25 a month fixed cost to the utility for me to consume also a very small amount of gas. One last thing, if you do live in a larger house, I mean, it gets harder. I'm in a townhouse, so it was easier for me to do. You're going to have to talk to an electrician. They can look at your panel and they can tell you what is or isn't feasible for you.
The other thing
Yeah.
I could add, Brad, if I could add to that, is my sound coming through okay?
Yes, you're fine, Gil.
Okay, great. I'm not going to turn my video on. I'm a bit remote. But the other thing you could do also, if you're in a 100 amp service, which might be constrained, is look at your entire home. So one thing that the EnerGuide energy audit will do for you is it'll lay out potential changes that you can make for your home in terms of possibly replacing your windows or adding internal or external insulation or attic insulation. All of these small little items will end up so that your entire home's heating load is lowered. And so if you can lower your home heating load, then you could potentially get a lower capacity heat pump, which will in turn require a lower breaker.
Point. Which touches on two other issues I want to deal with. One of which is the importance of getting that audit and getting it done before everything breaks down. We've had some discussion on the call about not waiting to the last minute. So Heather, maybe you could speak to what's involved in, the audit process and why people, even if they're not ready to do the heat pump conversion right this minute, should probably get the ball rolling on that.
Oh, a home energy audit can be a really very useful tool. So in a home energy audit, professional comes into your home and they poke around all over the place. So they're going to be looking up in your attic. They're going to be looking in your basement. They're going to be trying to see what's in the insulation on your basement. They're looking for holes in your walls, your exterior walls. They're going to be poking around all over the place, trying to get a good sense of how much insulation your home has. And then they're going to use a blower door test. So they have this thing that fits into your front door and it pressurizes the house or depressurizes, I can't remember which one, but it uses that to estimate how much air leakage is happening through your building envelope. And from all of that, they can give you an estimate of the total heating load for your home, which is really important number to have when you're looking to size the heat pump, because you want to make sure it's sized properly. They can tell you where the weaknesses are in your building envelope in terms of the insulation. So if they can tell you if there's enough insulation in your attic or whether it's worth adding more. They can tell you what they can, based on the age and other characteristics of your home, they can estimate what sort of insulation there is in your wall and whether it's worth investing in more insulation in your walls. They can tell you about your windows. They can do a really fantastic job. As with anything, it's good to get, ask around and see who other people have used for home energy auditors. There are some with more experience and some with less experience and some with more background that can do a better job than others. So useful to do that. It's going to cost you about $400, $500, $600 upfront, but you get most of that back if you eventually use the Home Efficiency Rebate Plus program, which is the new name for the Greener Homes Grant. So it's absolutely worth it. And you have to do the audit before you do the work. So if you think your furnace or your air conditioner is coming near the end of its life, you want to make sure you've got that audit already done so that you can go ahead and do the work that you need to do. And then after you've done that work, you get the second audit done. They come in again and they essentially verify that you've done the work that you say you've done, and then you'll qualify for the rebates. So it can be incredibly valuable. One of the things to keep in mind is they are modeling your home. So for some types of homes, they're going to be a little less accurate in estimating how much energy you use per year than in other homes. But overall, I've found that the numbers are pretty good. And I've been working in the last couple of years with database of over 44,000 of these data from 44,000 homes working around with it. So there's an awful lot of data that goes into this. Any other questions about those 100 autos?
Okay, so I just want to move on to smaller spaces, condos, townhouses, multi-res. What is the usefulness of a heat pump in those circumstances? And I don't know who wants to weigh in on this. Maybe Eric?
I could just comment quickly, and maybe Eric wants to add something, but the local area and municipalities quite often have programs or concierge services that offer support to what we call these MURBs, which are multi-unit residential buildings, condos. In Toronto, there is the High Rise program, which is spelled HI-RES. I answered this question in one of the questions. If anybody's interested, you could look it up. There's also an organization called TAF, the Atmospheric Fund. They also offer a similar concierge service. Yeah, we do intend on doing more work on these multi-unit residential buildings. There are lots of solutions for them. Yeah, I think for now, that's the information I have. If anybody else has anything to add.
I would just add, like, townhouses are like similar to detached houses, just with lower kind of heating load. So I'm in that situation. I use heat pump for space heating and heat pump for hot water. Once you get to larger multi-unit residential buildings, there's lots of solutions. It could be kind of suite level systems. So you could have each suite gets a heat pump, and there's lots of different ways to do that. And that's one of the things that keeps us busy, like collecting data. And then there's also whole building level systems. For example, one of the systems that we're working to monitor right now, they replace a large chiller with an air to water heat pump that's distributing hot water throughout the building, but the same basic process of the small heat pump. So in the multi-unit residential kind of sphere, there's lots of solutions as well.
Yeah, well, that touches on something that I want to bring Victor in on. One of the perennial questions that we have in these webinars is, can you combine a heat pump with radiators?
Great question.
Hydronic system.
Very, very popular, especially in places like downtown Toronto, where you've got hydronic systems. So what we call air to water heat pumps, that's looks like an air conditioner or a heat pump that Mike showed in his presentation outside, but is connected or generates warm water, hot water. Not as popular yet in North America. They are really gaining popularity in Europe and Asia, and have not had the same kind of impact. Some models are available here, but there are a few design considerations to take into account. So one is that the output temperature of the water from a heat pump is going to be lower than what you're getting out of a boiler. So the installing contractor really needs to be a hydronic specialist and understand how much heat will be emitted from the radiators at a lower temperature. And that's a more complicated kind of calculation and work than what we've been talking about today. So it's really important to get a contractor that is comfortable with hydronics and comfortable with heat pumps. And we don't have a lot of those yet. So I think it'll grow in popularity over the next few years as those products make it to North America, make a bigger splash. But right now it's going to be a little bit challenging to get that work done.
Another thing that's sort of come up a few times here is there sort of some sort of rule of thumb at when to keep the gas furnace, when to ditch it and go full heat pump? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
I would say it depends on your motivation. If you're environmentally motivated, you're probably going to try and reduce your gas consumption as much as possible. There also might be like a physical reason. With heat pump sizing, there's something called the thermal balance point. It's the point at which essentially your heat pump doesn't have enough capacity to heat the home anymore. And you may have to kind of, like, if you have a hybrid system, you're going to have to switch over to the furnace at that point. If you were really strictly economically motivated, one of the things that Enbridge is exploring right now is a smart switching system, which kind of looks at utility rates, and we'll choose whichever system is cheaper if you have a furnace and a heat pump installed. But I think, like, at the end of the day, from an economic perspective, if you were to fully get off of gas, there's some good economic reasons to do that if it's feasible for your home. And a home, for example, if you only had space and water heating, then it might be easier to just rely entirely on electricity and then save the money, that $25 a month that we've spoken about already. So yeah, I would say it depends on your motivation. There's no reason typically why you can't do all electricity, except where there's kind of, I don't know, technical constraints like service panel constraints. Maybe there's some issues for some homes there. Yeah, I guess ultimately at the end of the day, it depends on what you're trying to achieve.
Does the age of the furnace come into play as well? Oh, sorry, Gil, are you trying to come in on this?
Yeah, I was going to add to that exactly to your comment there. So I think definitely the age has something to play with it. So, you know, Victor might be able to answer this more accurately, but there is probably a lifetime that you could rely upon your furnace for. And, you know, what I've heard from industry is something around 15 years. So it might depend on, again, your level of comfort. If you have a 10-year-old furnace, do you want to heat that furnace and add like a coil only heat pump to it? How reliable is that furnace going to be? And let's say just the blower motor fails on that furnace, which is probably what you're going to be relying most on. It could be a $300 fix. It could be a $500-600 fix. I'm sure Victor has more. Yeah, he's giving me an up arrow there. So it depends on your level of comfort with your existing furnace. You know, maybe if it's 2, 3, 4 years old, maybe I would keep it. Victor, if you have anything to add,
yeah,
please.
thanks, Gil. I'll throw a couple of things on that. So the first is in the specifications for HER Plus and GHG, if you're doing a coil only match, it does specify that you should be doing that on a furnace that has an ECM, also called the DC blower motor, that's digitally commutated or electronically controlled motor. So that's a motor that is able to ramp up and down. It's more efficient than the old style PSC motors. So that's the first issue. You need to make sure you've got a furnace that has at least an ECM motor. The second problem, though, that you run into is, like Gil said, the cost of the components. Furnaces that have been sold in the last 10 years generally came with 10-year parts warranties. An ECM motor, replacement motor, is so expensive on a furnace that's out of warranty. It's horrific. So I would not recommend, if you've got a furnace that's more than 10 years old and you're looking at doing this, take advantage of the grant and do both at the same time. There's a question that keeps popping up in the Q&A about, do I need to just do, can the heat pump replace the furnace and the air conditioner? Of course, that's ideally what we want to do. And as Eric said, you know, moving to an all-electric system that is an air handler on the inside, right? So the air handler replaces the furnace, and you have a heat pump. Assuming you've got the electricity capacity, as Eric alluded to in your panel, and that your ductwork can move the requisite amount of air. And those are kind of the two issues that really pop up the most when we talk about cost and feasibility. Is, can you move enough air for the heat pump if you want to use the heat pump as your primary heating source? And that is kind of where we get into like the real thick of it, and you really have to understand what your existing capacity is. And the reason this is important is that when we talk about how much heat your house needs, we talk about your design heat loss. That's how much heat your house needs on the coldest hours of the year. So that's the 1% of the heating season is at that temperature. So when we try to move all the way to an all-electric system and use the heat pump for that last little bit, that's where we can get a little bit tricky when we're doing it on an existing duct system with an existing electrical system. So not impossible at all. It just, you need to make sure you've got a contractor who's comfortable and knows their way around it.
Great, thanks, Victor. Mike, maybe you can just reiterate for one of our viewers, how noisy is it?
Well, the heat pump itself isn't noisy. It's about the same, but the same level of noise that you get from an air conditioner, maybe a little bit less. With variable speed units too, they run at a lower rate when you're not using them as much. So like frankly, inside when the AC's on, our windows are closed, we can't hear it. In the wintertime when it's running, our windows are closed, so we can't hear it. So we're not exposed to the noise, and we certainly haven't gotten any complaints from the neighbors. I was just gonna come on screen to talk about the previous point very briefly, in that we had a 5-year-old furnace and we stuck the heat pump coils in. So we retrofitted our existing furnace to have that hybrid gas backup heat pump as our main source of heat. In hindsight, I was perhaps a little too frugal, a little too thrifty to invest the small amount more money that would have given us the new air handler and the electric backup that would have addressed the sort of level of anxiety we were having about what happens if it gets to -15 for 5 days straight and our house starts to actually cool off. We didn't have that in the first winter, which is why we felt comfortable turning off the gas. But in hindsight, we would have probably just made it would have been a better decision just to make the full investment and go with a combined unit that was built for the heat pump and the gas. Not that we've had problems with our system, it's just it probably would have been a better move on our part. So I'll chalk that one up to me being a little too cheap.
Well, I have to watch those pennies. A question I think would be good for Victor is, if you're going to replace an air conditioner with a heat pump, or both, is the installation cost going to be significantly higher?
Oh, this is a really challenging one. It's kind of like, how long is a piece of string? It really depends on the house, and that we're comparing apples to apples. We can do a really inexpensive furnace and air conditioner. We can do that same furnace with a relatively inexpensive heat pump. The grants that are currently available really swing the market to going with more efficient heat pumps, which without the grants would be unaffordable to most people. Many people would balk at the cost because it's so much more than doing an entry-level furnace and air conditioner. So, but if you're an existing Enbridge customer and you've got a $6,500 grant available, it really helps shrink that, and that's why they're doing it, to incentivize people to go to more efficient equipment. So how much more can it be? I have seen, we have, this is not a plug for ClimateCare, but we have 30 members across the province who are doing this all the time. And in many cases, we can do a qualifying, a GHG or HER plus qualifying system after the rebate for no more than what it would be to do a furnace and air that doesn't qualify for the rebate. But it really depends. You need to get a couple of quotes. Don't just call us. Get a couple of quotes from contractors that have experience and are comfortable with heat pumps. I see this again a lot in the Q&A, that people have been talked out of heat pumps by contractors. That is not uncommon, unfortunately. We're doing a lot of work to educate not just our members, but the industry as a whole about the benefits of heat pumps, and they're not that scary, but it's going to be challenging in some markets. You need to search out the contractors that are comfortable doing it. Look for Google reviews, go to HomeStars, ask them for how many heat pumps they do. If you were going to get a hip replacement, you would probably ask the orthopedic surgeon, how many of these have you done? Are you comfortable with the model that you're going to install in my hip? If you're having a heat pump installed, ask those same questions. How many of these have you done? How do you sell this brand all the time? Are you comfortable? Have you gotten factory training or training from the distributor? Are your folks certified residential or commercial refrigeration mechanics? Those are the kinds of questions you want to be asking.
Fantastic. Now here's an odd one. There has been some, Enbridge, I think, is out there promoting the idea of gas-fired heat pumps. Can anybody tell us what those involved and whether they are a viable alternative to electric?
Not ready for prime time. Certainly not on the residential side. So, Gil, I think you've actually tested one.
Yeah, we did. There's two things with gas heat pumps. Perhaps Eric could chime in as well if I don't answer this question fully. The gas heat pumps can have like a maximum of efficiency from what we've seen from our testing as well as others as like something like 1.4 or 140%, whereas air source heat pumps can be upwards of 300 and geothermal can be upwards of 450 to 500. And so there's the efficiency matter to begin with. Secondly, with the gas heat pumps, you're still using gas. So you still have, whether that's your motive or not is to switch to a cleaner fuel and a lower greenhouse gas emitting fuel. But you're still using natural gas, which is very high in GHG emissions.
Anything to add, Eric?
I would add, on the like Victor mentioned, on the residential side, we haven't. I know there is stuff available, at least in the States. I've seen kind of advertisements. We haven't looked at it. At the end of the day, if ultimately we're trying to find low carbon solutions, and if a residential heating technology is still consuming a lot of gas, then the carbon savings is going to be much lower than something that was higher efficiency and electric. That being said, I don't know, maybe in a multi-unit kind of residential large building context, there's like a cost argument to be made there. We're looking at stuff right now. I don't really have any kind of final say on it. But yeah, I don't think certainly in the single family residential, we haven't tested anything or have much to say on it ultimately.
Okay. Does anyone know what the shelf life of an eco energy audit or whatever they're calling it now is? Like, how long is your audit good for?
So there's no ticking clock on the audit, on the pre-audit. You need to have it done before you commence any work. But it doesn't run out. Like if you don't get the work done within 6 months, like you have to do it again. You do obviously need to get a post audit done. Now the challenge with HER Plus or greener homes is that you only get one kick at the can. So you're going to open the file with a pre-audit, and you're going to do all of your various, measures, whether that be a heat pump, heat pump water heater, windows, doors, insulation. And then when you're all done, you do a post audit and you apply, for that to complete the process and get paid out. If you start the process and you say, well, I'm going to do the heat pump and stop, and you do your post audit and you file the paperwork, that's it. You've got your $6,500 and you lose out on any additional remaining incentives. So it's important to plan this out a little bit in advance. I saw a question in the chat about, having the audit done back in 2021. I'm not sure if you had it done before or after the start of the current program. If it was done before the start of the program, then for sure, I'm going to tell you, you need to go back and ask your energy auditor, and maybe even Enercan if they'll accept that audit. If it was done since the start and you haven't done the post audit, I think you're okay. But that auditor is going to have to come back in and do a post audit. So you may as well give them a call and ask them that question specifically for when that's done.
Okay, I think we're going to do one final question, and it's more of an observation than a question, and maybe Heather can address this, which is the versatility of heat pumps. So we've heard about heat pump water heaters, heat pump air conditioning, heat pump heating, home heating, heat pump dryers. Can you tell, and you in your presentation, Heather, sort of noted that, the technology is essentially the same as what's in your fridge and your conventional air conditioner. Can you just sort of speak to the idea that, heat pump can do a lot of things in your house?
Sure, I think you've touched on all of them. They're in your home. Yeah, anytime you're moving heat from one place to another, the most efficient way to do that is with a heat pump. And so what your freezer is doing is it's moving heat from inside the freezer box into your room. And I like to say that if you trust your freezer, you should trust a cold climate air source heat pump, because it's moving heat from -20 inside the box to +20 inside the rest of the room. It's just moving heat with refrigeration cycle, which is exactly what a heat pump is doing. And yeah, we haven't heard very much about them yet here in North America, but heat pump dryers are very common in Europe, and heat pump water heaters are getting highly promoted in some parts of the US. We haven't seen as many of them here, but we will. And that's because they are so incredibly efficient. And the technology keeps improving. I hear it feels like every couple of weeks I hear something new and exciting in the heat pump world, and how the technology is getting better and more efficient and easier to install, easier to put in different types of homes, different types of applications. It's really exciting, but it's also, the technology is good enough now that you don't need to wait for it to get better. It's already really good technology. Does that help, Brad?
I think that's a great way to sum things up for tonight. We've had a lot of questions tonight, and we will be doing our best to synthesize those and make the answers available on the Clean Air Alliance website at cleanairalliance.org/heat-pumps. I want to really thank both our presenters and our expert question answerers who have answered something like 90 questions online tonight, and numerous in the live chat. So thank you all for participating again. This is the third time they've done this for us, and they always do a great job. So thank you for joining us. Please tell others about the great technology that is available now. We will also be posting the recording of this webinar, which you can review anything that you want to look at. Eric mentioned the TRCA helpline, help ask a question portal. That's in his presentation. So that's a great place to get any additional questions answered. And just as a final thought, just to say that the Clean Air Alliance is doing great work to decarbonize the electricity system in Ontario, and trying to do its part to fight the increase in the use of gas-fired power that rather undercuts the advantages of heat pumps in some ways. Not entirely, but certainly we would be better off with a 100% renewable electricity system, we believe. So if you felt like supporting the great work of this organization, please visit cleanairalliance.org. Donate. Thanks again for joining, and that's a wrap for us. So good night and stay comfortable.